Hello, and hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode, If Not Now Wen. In today's show, I am so excited to invite my friend, my mentor, my amazing serious entrepreneur, Satish, to join with us. Before the startup world, Satish has over 25 years of leadership experience in large major corporations such as IBM, AT&T Bell Labs. He has experience in taking the emerging technology from inception to market validation to revenue growth. As a serial entrepreneur, and most recently, Satish was co-founder and executive board member at Axon Propec, which was successfully acquired in 2016. He is currently on his fourth startup venture already as a founder and CEO of Predicir, the last mile in actionable, predictable analytics to identify, eliminate, waste cloud spend. With that, everybody, please join me to welcome Satish. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show. So with that, super excited and honored, Satish, have you to join us today. I'm curious, how does all the magic journey begin for you?
So for me, growing up in India, the career choices are very limited, especially the time I grew up. Either you're going to be an engineer or a doctor, right?
Engineer
Only
and
two
doctor.
streams. Yeah. So for me, I liked engineering little better than medicine. That's why I became an engineer. There's no big grand idea as to why I became an engineer. I was very queasy about needles and blood and things. So I said, okay, I'm not going to be a doctor. So I'll be an engineer. So it's as sort of non goal oriented as it is in terms of why I became an engineer, right? Uh, so, and also engineering in a way gave me the opportunity uh, to sort of look at, okay, what do I do next now that I have a degree? What do I do next? So, in my head, it was all about, okay, what's a transition that I can make now that I have a piece of paper that says I'm an engineer, right? And to me, I always wanted to explore the world. That was more a motivating factor than anything
Do
else.
you always know that?
I always knew that because I was very curious as a child.
Yeah.
And I would, if I were to define myself, I'm a dreamer. I dream a lot, right? And to me, one of that was how do I explore the world, right? So that was the fundamental basis. And I said, okay, what's the best way to pursue that? And so my mother's side of the family, there were her brothers who had come to the US long time ago. And they would always regale me with stories about how fun their journey was and how exciting their lives are and things like that. So that led me to say, okay, my next step is I need to go to the US.
I love that. You are the dreamer at heart.
Right. So at the end of the day, I said, okay, what's the best way to come to the US? Is for most immigrants, they come here to pursue higher education, right? I mean, that's typically how an immigrant's journey happens, coming to the shores of the US, if you will. And so, even though I was not that big a fan of yet another degree, especially in engineering, but I said, you know what? That may be okay because that's the best path to get to the US. So I pursued a master's degree in electrical engineering, which actually I did enjoy. I mean, I have nothing against engineering,
Yeah.
but I am not built out to be an engineer.
Yeah.
There are people who really have that engineering mind.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those.
I love that you know that about yourself.
Well, I learned that. I mean, I
Mm.
can't say I knew that very sort of in my inner core
Yeah.
as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
but all I knew was I cannot be one of those people who can be given a certain project and say, go develop this. That's not me.
Can we take a second to talk about when you first come to America? I
Sure.
still remember you mentioned It's one of the very first days. You sat in the Florida, this fancy, student courts, and you order a burger. And can you tell the story?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was sort of my, foray into how I thought about assimilating into the culture, right?
hmm
So one thing I always knew, even growing up as a child, was anything that's an uncomfortable question or a question that I did not know the answer to, I usually used sense of humor as a way to deal with it.
Tell us about that
Right.
story.
So that's really my defense mechanism, if you will. I mean, so in essence, I was sitting in this cafeteria all by myself, second day of school, uh, and that's the spring quarter. I came for the spring part of the
hmm
year, and so the campus was not still hustle and bustling. People were still coming back from spring break.
hmm
So I had a burger and fries, classic American food, and I'm sitting in the cafeteria, and this old lady who worked in the cafeteria, really amazing person, sweet lady. She came up to me, and out of concern, she did not know if I knew what I was eating. She said, "Son, I want to make sure you know that's beef." And she waited for me to sort of be alarmed and say, "Oh my God, I'm eating beef." And I had this wry smile on my face, and I looked at her and said, "Oh, that's okay because only Indian cows are holy. American cows are not." And she just fell to the floor laughing uh, because I would made that comment, and that kind of stood with me. And I've told this story many times about that is sort of my entree into assimilating into the culture, and people usually react well to sense of humor.
I just felt that story so Satish, so you, because you are someone that I always not only admire and inspired by, but you're just so chill and you don't take yourself too seriously, and you can make joke and laugh at yourself as with everyone. And I just felt that humbleness within you, just really special
Well, thank
about
you.
you.
I just feel like a sense of humor is something this world needs more of,
Yeah.
right? That's all I have to say about
That's why
that.
you are here. So tell us, now you have a degree, you finally arrived in the United States, you loving it here, but now what? You mentioned that engineer is not what you wanted to do any beyond.
Correct, but also I knew that was a pathway I had to take in order to establish myself here, right? So I finished my electrical engineering masters. I was
hmm
very fortunate because my I did my master's thesis in a topic that was very central focus to IBM.
hmm
And the reason that happened was the advisor that I have in my graduate school was on a sabbatical from IBM. He was a very renowned person in design for test, Dr. David Wu,
hmm
who was my mentor.
Mm.
And he had taken a 2 year sabbatical. He was an IBM fellow, and he had come to teach at the university. So I happened to run into him and have a conversation, and he took a liking to me, and he said, "Would you like to pursue a master's thesis in design for test?" And honestly, when he asked me that question, I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no clue what design for test was. And I basically said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And he's like, "Okay, then let's do a master's thesis in design for test."
I love that you have such an attitude, like I call it yes and attitude. Whatever universe brought to you, like, yes, let's do
Yeah.
it.
And I just took a liking to this person who was so accomplished, who took the time to talk to me and inspire me. And
Mm.
and I did my master's thesis in design for test. And lo and behold, that's a very typical sort of the topic that I focused on was very centrally focused at IBM
hmm
in level sensitive scan design. And so, long story short, I was actually, Austin was not even my destination. That's a little bit of a small story on the side. I was supposed to go to Intel in Santa Clara for an interview with Intel. But, that was during Christmas. So I had to stay somewhere before I go to California because, I didn't have a place to stay in California. But I had a good friend in Austin who offered saying, hey, why don't you drive to Austin from Florida, stay here, and then go to Santa Clara? That way you'll not spend a lot of money. You know, when you're just out of school,
Yeah.
I had $75 in my bank account, right? So it's not like I could just, fly off to California or anything. So I came to Austin. And while I was here, I really loved Austin. And this is 30 plus years ago, but I just loved the vibe of Austin. And this friend said to me, hey, you're here anyway. Why can't you just circulate your resume and see if there are opportunities? And you're still going to go to California for this interview anyway. But while you're here, make the best out of it. And that's it. I just circulated my resume to a few people. Those were the, Christmas times. Not many people are even around to talk to you. And long story short, 4th of January, I got a phone call from some recruiter saying, hey, people at IBM looked at your resume and they find it interesting. Would you be willing to talk to them? I'm like, willing to talk to them? I'd be happy to talk to them. And so the rest is history. I was hired by IBM, never went to that interview for Intel in Santa Clara.
Wow.
So Austin was in my,
Yeah.
it was destined to be.
Yeah, it's kind of just cool that you were just saying yes to one thing, lead to another, and then boom, you are here
Precisely.
30 years later.
Yeah, precisely. So I really need to thank, Dr. David Wu, who, gave me the opportunity to do that master's thesis.
I think it's so fortunate that, speaking myself as an immigrant, that there are so many angels along the way.
Correct.
Give us a hand and shine a light for us and shining the pathway for us. And I think it's amazing and incredible, your mentor giving you an opportunity.
Absolutely.
But also reflecting back, it's you who say yes to the opportunity.
Exactly.
So kudos to you. So now you started a new job, you land in Austin, Texas, life is good, you are climbing the corporate ladder, and now what?
So I was doing engineering and design at IBM, which I can't say I was very thrilled about because that's not my forte. But, you have to pay your dues before you go anywhere, right? And then I got this another amazing opportunity to work for AT&T Bell Labs, which is
wow.
Which is a wow. I mean, for a 24, 25-year-old guy to be going and working for AT&T Bell Labs was a dream come true.
The world's best engineering
Premier organization, right?
Yes, at the time especially.
But at the same time, it's again very engineering and research focused, which is not my forte. But I said, wow, I got to take this, right? And, to be able to meet people who you had read in your textbooks is mind-boggling, right? Herman Gummel, Sam Poon, who invented the bipolar transistor, were people in my building in Murray Hill, New Jersey.
Wow.
I mean, for me, it was almost like I was a kid in a candy store, I'm like, holy, these guys are people I've read in my books. And today I get to see them face to face.
How does that experience shaping you, Satish?
Mind-boggling, right? I mean, first of all, you're intimidated beyond belief, right? Because Sam Poon actually interviewed me for this job. And what was amazing was, so I was being hired as an applications engineer in this organization. And Sam Poon is talking to me, and I can't even keep, words are not coming out properly. I mean, as you know me very well, Wen, words are not a problem for me. I can talk forever, right? But believe it or not, seeing somebody who's like a, luminary in the field who was in your textbook to be sitting across from you to have that conversation is mind-boggling, right? So anyway, fast forward, I did application engineering, but I being always the sort of the troublemaker in these big meetings they used to have, I used to ask all these questions, about, so I know you guys have all this great intellectual property, you guys have this technology, so how are you monetizing it? Are you selling it to the external world and all that kind of stuff? And you have to understand, in Bell Labs, people don't talk about monetizing anything, right? They're all research-oriented people. They're only worried about what's the next coolest thing they should be working on and things like that. But, it could have gone one of two ways, right? they could have looked at me and said, who is this idiot asking us all these dumb questions? Go away. But they did not. They took me seriously. And the organization that I worked in, Bell Labs Design Automation, started to seriously think about, I mean, not that I prompted them to think about it, but it just gave them a little more impetus to focus on it. And lo and behold, 6 months of my application engineering converted into business development guy. They said, okay, looks like this guy loves to, want to go take our technology and see if there are customers out there and things like that. And Bell Labs was a very closed in organization. They thought that their technology was so good, they shouldn't be giving it to the external world because of competition and things like that. But at the same time, internal organizations within AT&T at the time were looking at them and saying, no, 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 no. If you think what you're developing is extremely good, you need to validate that with the rest of the world in order to let us know that you're developing all these things. So anyway, that was my first pivot, if you will, to getting into a business role within Bell Labs.
Was it what you always wanted, or that just also accidentally
I
happened?
had no clue, right? I mean, I was just going down this path, hoping somewhere I'll catch a break. Because what happens when you have an engineering degree, especially, I'm talking about 30 years ago, is people literally put a box around you and said, look, you're an engineer. What are you talking about business and that and marketing? We have other people who are built to do that, right? So they didn't fundamentally look at engineers as marketeers or salespeople, so to speak, in the traditional sense of the word, right? So somebody had to take a chance on you to give you that opportunity in order to be what you wanted to be. And Bell Labs gave me that opportunity.
So now you have your break.
Right. I have my first break. And not only did they do that, they were amazingly supportive of that journey, right? So they sent me to Wharton to get an executive program that Bell Labs already had a good relationship. So I did that thanks to them, right? And so that even gave me a really big boost of even having tools to apply to what I was trying to do. And long story short, believe it or not, I was the first guy in core Bell Labs to get a commission check. They had never had a commission plan per se at all, because they're all researchers and so they had to sort of build a incentive structure for me with a base salary and a commissionable thing. I actually wrote my own plan because they were like, we don't know what the heck this is. Why don't you come up with a plan and let us know how we should pay you?
Amazing.
So I basically wrote my own compensation plan. So anyway, so we made enough of a foray into the external market, the design automation tools within Bell Labs, that Cadence as a company noticed that we had some good technology, and Cadence acquired this group that is Bell Labs Design Automation. And that's how I came to Cadence, which is really where I sort of went up, if you will, the proverbial corporate ladder. And I was head of worldwide sales for a business unit.
Let's take a second and talk about that. Wow. You're the head of sales for worldwide?
For a business unit, yes.
That's incredible. How do you like that role?
No, so even there were quite a few twists and turns, right? So I make it to Cadence, and especially if you're coming into an organization as a company that's been acquired, you don't have too much of a say in your destiny when you arrive there, right? I mean, they're going to always look at you like, okay, we acquired you, so settle down. We'll tell you what to do, right? I mean, that's typical. I mean, that's nothing new. So they actually gave me an assignment that was pretty much doomed to fail, if you will, right? Because it was a very esoteric product. It was a very left side product. The regular sales channel didn't even want to touch it. So they were like, okay, here's this new guy. Let's give it to him. If he does well, great. If it doesn't well, he'll leave and go somewhere else. So that was the sort of proposition, if
Oh.
you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sure enough, I took it and ran with it and made it successful. And then they were like, oh, okay. So this guy is okay. He can do it. That's how I inherited more responsibilities.
Yeah.
And hence, about 4 years later, I was heading up worldwide sales for that business unit.
Wow. So you really swing upstream on that. That
Absolutely.
was not an easy jump. And
Not at all.
wow.
Not at all.
So Satish, at this point, you've been in America, you've been living your American dream. You've been really have one break after another. You've been, catching, like you've been really stepping into your greatness and doing things you love.
Right.
At this moment, you have amazing reputation, you make great money, you live well, like all the things. Why do you think about entrepreneurship?
So, there you have to be a little crazy, right? I mean, the one thing I tell people about entrepreneurship is do not look at it as a romantic idea, right? Because a lot of people have this romanticism associated with entrepreneurship, right? And that's a very, yes, there is a little romance to it. I mean, let's be honest. You have to be a little romantic about it. You have to be a little dreamy about it, if you will. Those are all ingredients, but that can't be the foundation for you to become an entrepreneur, right?
What is your why?
So for me, it's really about curiosity, and plus, entrepreneurship gives you the unique ability to be jack of all trades.
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
But at that moment, when you're in a fancy executive spot, how do you even think about entrepreneurship?
So I'll tell you what happened. I mean, so being, head of worldwide sales is you're always in the pressure chamber, right?
Yeah.
You're in the pressure cooker day in and day out, quarter by quarter.
Yeah.
It's all about numbers, right? One thing about sales is there's no hiding. You can't hide, right? You can be in a technology group, you can be in a marketing group, you can be in a product group. You can hide a little bit. In sales, there's no hiding, right? Either you post numbers, or you are not posting numbers. End of story. It's very binary, right? So after a while, even though you enjoy everything that goes with it, and for me, the most fun of the whole worldwide sales role was I traveled the world, right? And to me, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I sort of equate sales at a fundamental level to teaching. You really, in essence, are, because you're an evangelist, right? You have to evangelize what you're selling, which means you have to have a good grasp of what you're actually selling. Second, you have to make the connect of the value proposition to the customer in a very cohesive way. And also, another great attribute of a good sales executive is you have to be very affable, very friendly, right? People, there is a quote that I learned from one of my mentors who told me, people buy from people they like. And that's a very simple statement, but a very telling statement. You sort of have to be liked in order, because if everything was on par with your product and your competitor's product, the reason they bought it from X or Y is because there was that relation aspect to it, right? So relationship selling is a big aspect of anything you do, right? It's not just only in sales. As an entrepreneur, I mean, if you're a founder and CEO, what are you really? You're really an evangelist for your company. You're the chief spokesperson for your company, right?
Yes, and yes.
Right. So if you come across very, not so likable, you're sort of like, oh my God, I gotta do this, and that comes across, people are not gonna be even willing to sit and talk to you, right? So being affable is extremely important in any of these roles that you play in life.
I love that. So what happened to you?
So it came a point that I was sort of bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, right? because
Was it always there or just that moment,
well,
that time?
Let's be honest. If you are trained an engineer and you reformed yourself into business development and sales executive and running a sizable P&L, which means you're a bit crazy and you're trying to do things that you're not sort of built to do, if you will, right? So it's a learning exercise. Life in itself on a daily basis is you're learning something new,
So
right?
beautiful.
That's basically what it comes down to, right? Any aspect of your life, if you're going to really enjoy it, you're learning something new, right? Somebody is teaching you something new every day. And it's the universe that's teaching you something new every day.
I love that.
Right?
I tell people the life is just a spiritual journey in a way where just between you and the
100%.
universe.
100%. And you know what? There are many different kinds of people, right? People are very happy with exactly what they're doing for X amount of years, right? And God bless them, right? Because you need all kinds of people in order to make this thing a whole.
We need diversity.
Exactly, right? So you can't all be crazy like us, right? Because if you had too many crazy people just like us, you can't run a very successful operation. You need people who will do certain things and not be bored about it, and even if they're bored about it, they'll be okay with it, right?
Check and balance,
right? So at the end of the day, so I probably somewhere had that entrepreneurial bug, right? But in order to do so, you'll have to at least have some foundation. I mean, you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I mean, you can say that, but you'll have to sort of work towards it, right?
So what was that one moment?
So for me, the one moment was really, I'd come to a point in my sort of executive journey that I didn't feel fulfilled enough, right? Just because you're making good money and your life is good doesn't really mean that everything is great, right? That's why I keep telling people, you see people from the outside and you say, oh my God, that person must have a fantastic life. You really don't know what that person is feeling on a day-to-day basis, right? In their life or in their journey. So for me, boredom is an enemy, right? The minute I get bored, I have to look for something that stimulates me, right? So in this sort of journey of being a senior leadership person or an executive in a company was fantastic. It was very fulfilling. And 10 years behind, I mean, if you went back 10 years from that point, if somebody had asked me, oh, you'll be a pretty big whatever, and you'll be happy with that, I'm like, absolutely. That would be the end of it, right? I would love it, That would be my answer, right? But you grow as a person, right? There is that personal growth. I had come to a point where I said, okay, I want to try something new. And, people around me looked at me and said, I must be super crazy.
Let's talk about that. You walk away such a huge glamorous lifestyle.
Yeah, very glamorous. Yeah, absolutely.
With nothing.
I mean, one week I was flying to Rome. The other week I'm in Munich and Paris. And also, the beauty of a sales executive job is while you are doing, good business with customers and everything, you get to have a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
Because, you're having these great dinners and you're meeting with clients, you're having great conversations. And I was so curious to learn more about other cultures and their food. And I'm a foodie and I'm a wine guy. So that added to the whole notion of travel, right?
So were you not afraid, Satish, walking away from all the fancy things on the
table? You know what? I would be lying if I said I was not afraid. You have to be afraid, right? I mean, it's a natural.
But you still did it anyway.
I still did it only because what I didn't want is regrets, right? I didn't want to go 10 years more and say, gosh, I wish I had given this a shot, right? And also, I also had this belief system, I was built into this whole narrative that, okay, so what? I will give this a shot. What's the worst that can happen? I'll not be great at it or I'll fail. So what? I'll go find something else, right? So there was that fundamental sort of faith and confidence that I have sort of done enough to build enough of a repertoire professionally that I am able to go do other things.
I love that. I
And
feel like you almost make a calculated
you
decision.
have to, right? Because at the end of the day, it can't be a leap to an extent of I don't even know what I'm doing, right? That's a bit too much, right? So you have to sort of internally tell yourself, okay, is this something I want to do? And what has always helped me in life is I sit down and formulate and say, what's the worst that can happen? See, because once you face that aspect of what's the worst that can happen scenario, then there are no irrational fears.
I like that. I love that you just sit down facing your darkest fear. And if you'll be okay with it, everything else is good.
Correct, right? I mean, because irrational fear is what makes you do dumb things, right? But if you sort of formulate to some extent and say, okay, if this is the worst that can happen, am I going to be okay dealing with it, right? And obviously, for me, just to put it in perspective, the other life-changing event that had happened for me at that time was my son was born in 2002, right? And I fell in love with this little kid.
Yeah.
And to me, the thought of traveling the world while this kid is growing up was a bit disconcerting to me. I wanted to be a part of his life in a more meaningful way, right? And so that also made a big, that was a major contributing factor in why I said, okay, this will give me the flexibility to sort of be around him and work around it and still pursue the things I want to do. And obviously, not to forget, the overarching thing in all this is having a supportive spouse. Let's not bury the lead here, right?
Yes. Family, truly, the support, the
so
love.
my wife was totally supportive in this journey. I mean, if
beautiful.
not, I would not be doing this, right? So so that's extremely important.
Beautiful. So tell us, how's first venture
So
went?
so first venture, was in the radio frequency identification space, and you know this because Tejas is a common friend to both of us. So he and I did this startup, and we learned a lot. The thing about RFID was that was sort of revolutionizing the whole supply chain aspect to it, and it was sort of mandate driven. There were two big stakeholders, Walmart and Department of Defense, who were driving this, right? And so essentially, what I think at the end of the day, we had extremely good technology that we developed. We were going after the low cost market, but also it was consolidating myriad of things and putting it into one device, right? I mean, basically at the time what they were doing was they were just glumming the RFID circuitry onto a server and building it, selling it for $5,000. We said, no, you don't have to do that. Keep RFID just the way it is as a device. And there are server-centric software that can take the data, prune it, and you can do all the analysis you need. So anyway, so long story short, I think there I feel like we were ahead of the curve, if you will, or
timing.
Timing is the issue, right? So we were trailblazers, right? So as a consequence, we showed the people who came after us what should be done and what should not be done, right? To me, more importantly, what should not be done.
Was it the hard lesson to swallow? Given that moment, you were coming just from this fancy growing.
Yes. It is a knock on sort of your ego to a certain extent. But having said that, I can say this now with more conviction than if you had asked me this 18 plus years ago, is when you do not succeed at a venture initially, you are not objective enough to draw lessons from it. because it's very close to the event, right? You've
Mhm.
just gone through it. You can't be objective about it.
So what is your biggest lesson from
So
that?
for me, the biggest lesson was you learn how to formulate things better,
Mhm.
right? And also, you, you'll also learn to adapt to different circumstances. But really, in that venture, I don't think there was any mistakes made per se. It's just the dynamic of the market, right?
So when do you decide to move on? How do you know?
No, you will know. I mean, if you're pragmatic enough and willing to accept reality, I mean, what happens sometimes is you can sit there and be very adamant about not wanting to accept something, right? But at some point, pragmatism has to come in, and you have to be able to say, "Hey, listen, you fought the good fight,
Mm.
time to move on," right? And two things happened, to be honest with you. It was not just the market timing per se. Also, don't forget this big financial event happened in 2008 when the
Mhm.
market crashed and everything went to hell in a handbasket, right? And if you're going after disruptive technology or something that's going to change things, businesses are not going to entertain disruptive stuff when they are going through financial ruin, right? That's not the time when somebody's going to stick their neck out and say, "I'm going to do something disruptive." Nobody's going to do that, right? So,
So how would you keep going when at the time it was so challenging and the environment as well as your first venture? How do you feel like, what, this is not the right perfect moment, but I'm gonna keep going? How do you keep moving forward?
to some extent, there has to be a reprieve, right? I mean, you're not going to jump from one venture to another uh, like in days. I mean, that's never going to happen. You're going to step back, take stock of what needs to happen and things like that. And also, you need to go back and replenish your bank account. So you go do a real job for a while. And you don't just jump from one venture into the other, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
So did some of that,
Mm.
right? And then you also start to realize what many people will tell you is you do learn a lot from failures, right? And that's not just a cliche, right? Sometimes people use that as a cliche. Oh, you learn more from failures than successes. To a large extent, it's true because it gives you a lot of objectivity, right? And if you're going to, and by the way, you have to be willing to learn. I mean, you can't just say failures will teach you something. I mean, if you're not open to learning, it'll never teach you, right? I mean,
Very good point.
yeah, because if you're going to say, that just whatever, it was some uh, thing that happened, and there's nothing to learn from that. I know everything under the sun. Uh, I'll it was just that, this or the other. Give hundreds of other reasons and move on, right? But anyway, so to me, you from anything that's a failure or what's considered a failure, because really, if you think about it, when startups, see, people have this very binary notion that a success in a company or a startup or a venture has to be either an extremely good exit or a financial event that made you super rich. Yeah, you only hear some of those. You never hear the ones that never made it, right? But what I'm saying is there are other kinds of exit too. You could have developed certain things that somebody can take and run with. That's an exit as well. I mean, your exit doesn't have to be the classic grandiose Hollywood ending of you making $1 billion. Those happen few and far between.
Mhm.
For every Google and Facebook, there are probably 50 to 65,000 startups that went to the graveyard that nobody talks about. Right?
Mhm.
I mean, even
Mhm.
the VCs don't ever tell you how many investments of theirs failed. They'll only tell you the two that succeeded very much, right? But that's just part of life. That's how
Mm.
things are, right?
So tell us about what is the journey afterwards for
So
you?
afterwards, I did some actually very meaningful startups, right?
Mhm.
So we did one in the semiconductor supply chain, right? which dealt with long life cycle products and with obsolescence, which is a big issue in the long life cycle products as it pertains to semiconductors and things like that. We worked with companies like Flextronics, contract manufacturing, and things like that. So that startup was very niche, very small problem solving. It was not something disruptive like the first startup, right? So this one had very clear goals in mind. So that was a smooth sailing, if you will, right? But also it had very clear boundaries. It didn't have this massive, with RFID, it was a sort of a transformational kind of technology, pivoting away from barcodes to going into this RFID where line of sight is not the issue, all those things, quite disruptive for that marketplace, right? So the subsequent startups were, sort of very, problem A, solution B, right? That kind of startup, very clean, right? And then, of course, subsequent to that was a very fun, crazy, and the space that I had no much knowledge in, which is in the polymer space.
Which is crazy.
Which is crazy, but this is a fun startup that I was part of. And, my cousin is the one who, he was the subject matter guy. I was sort of the, hey, go fundraise, let's go get a patent. How do we sort of look at the business aspects of it, things like that? Because I didn't have much subject matter expertise in the polymer space. But the end product of it was fun, right? Which is, non-refillable, tampered evident closures for liquor, high-end spirits, right? So that was a fun 5+ year journey and a good exit.
Yeah. How's that feel by having an amazing exit?
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, it's always good, to have those as well, right?
Yeah. Almost like that's like a first big validation ever since you start entrepreneurship
Correct.
journey.
Exactly. Yeah, that was definitely a big validation, right? I mean, especially what I liked about that venture was I learned way more on a daily basis than any other venture because I had no clue about. Meaning the core expertise that's not my core expertise, and that had manufacturing and it was capital intensive. So not only did we raise cash, funds from high net worth individuals initially, friends and family, but we had to go take a bank debt. I never participated in any venture where you take debt from bank, and those can be very tricky.
Talking about raising capital, what's your take about a key things for any folks and entrepreneurs in the journey while raising capital? What do you think is the key to your success at the moment?
So to me, so this is just my personal observation about fundraising is more typically what people do, which I consider is a bit of a mistake, is they try to raise money very early, right? And I'll tell you why that is not a good thing. Until you've sort of formulated your strategy of what you're trying to do, and you've also had some mini failures with those starting points, if you will. Because in a startup's journey, what people don't realize who have never done a startup is there are multiple failures that happen in the first 6 to 9 months.
Yes.
I mean, you can call them hiccups or failures. Take your pick, right?
Yeah.
Semantics, right?
It's not made up words.
Right. These are all, yeah, exactly. Failure sounds so debilitating, crazy.
Or big.
Yeah. Hiccup sounds very, sort of mundane and very, innocuous, if you will, right? But if you really think about it, when the first 12 to 15 months of any startup, to me, is almost a gestational process, right? Where so many things are fluid, right? There's nothing sort of concrete. And, not to say there are not exceptions. There could be startups where the founders know from day one everything under the sun, and they know how their product plan looks like, what they're trying to do, what their service strategies, yada, yada, yada. But that's not truly, that's a utopian startup, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But a true startup is really where things are fluid and people are putting phenomenal ideas on the table, but you still have to vet them. That's why I as you know, I teach a class of intro to entrepreneurship for high school students and things like that. And one of the first things I tell them is, validating what you have is so important before you do too many things in any business venture, right? You got to go to who you think are the consumers of what you're trying to develop and make sure to validate that indeed that's what they want to consume, right?
Having a product market fit is crucial
Crucial.
before you raise capital.
Correct. And typically what happens is, and this is true of most entrepreneurs. So I'm not saying, this is me or you or whatever. Any entrepreneur, initially, they're not happy listening to contrarian viewpoints. Because you have a belief system, right? I mean, you believe in something, so it's your baby. So when somebody tells you to your face, that's not going to fly, or whatever you're talking about has been done before, or somebody else has already done it, or whatever, your first reaction is to be defensive, right? You're going to always try to tell them how different this is, how unique this is, or how wrong they are, or whatever. And those things all happen. But to me, validation is so important because at the end of the day, that process of what you do in terms of validating what you're trying to do, in fact, I even say wash, rinse, repeat. So do that at every step of your startup journey, right? Whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever it is. At every stage, you're still validating something because you may have developed something, you've done a different variant of it, or a different release of it, or a different version of it. You still need that validation. So consistently, you are going back to audience in order to understand what's going on. And the other thing I tell most entrepreneurs who are starting off is, please surround yourself with advisors who are very comfortable telling you you're wrong. And that's something easier said than done, right? Because people usually surround themselves with cheerleaders who are telling you, oh, Satish, Wen, you guys are awesome. I mean, I can't even think of anything wrong with what you're doing. It's I'm on. Let me know. I'll bring my pom poms and
always bring the pom
cheerlead,
pom.
right? So what has served me well in my journey is, even friends who are very honest with you, right? I'm blessed to have good friends who can tell me, Satish, that's bullshit, man. Don't do it. There's no value to that, or let me tell you why what you're thinking of is not that great, or earth shattering, or transformational, whatever it is, right? And that's good to have. That's very healthy to surround yourself with people who have your best interest at heart. We have to underline that, because you don't want to just have contrarians for the sake of being contrarians, right? That you can find anywhere. You don't even have to look for them. They'll find you and tell you how wrong you are, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people who actually care for you, who want the best for you, who are your well-wishers, and then they'll also tell you the other things that go with it.
Love that. So really 2 keys of successful fundraising is, number 1, have your product market fit. Test, test, and test. Secondly, surround yourself with the right advisor, trusting mentors will tell you no,
Right.
and help you really pivot, build the product.
And build a team that's way more smarter than you.
Surround people with you who are
way
loving.
more smarter than you.
Yay.
So, which sort of comes to when people ask me, right? So, what do you consider when you are a founder and CEO, right? And the best analogy that I come up with for me is the conductor of an orchestra.
Tell
right?
us more.
Yeah. So if you look at these phenomenal, the New York Philharmonic or the Israeli Philharmonic, whatever these big orchestras that you see, or even the local orchestra that you see, there is a string band, there's people who are playing violin, somebody's playing the piano, somebody's trumpet, whatever it is, right? They're all outstanding, gifted musicians in what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they still need somebody to come in and organize that whole thing and conduct and coordinate, if you will, in order to bring out the best out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is how I look at if you're either a founder or a CEO or somebody in that leadership position in that startup. Because at the end of the day, this guy may not know how to play the violin or the piano or the string instrument, whatever the case may be. But he knows enough about what they bring to the table to put that ensemble together and create beautiful music, right? So that to me is my definition of an effective founder or CEO.
I love that.
Yeah.
The ability to bring a beautiful symphony ensemble
Correct.
with a wide, diverse team
Correct.
members.
So you don't need to be the smartest person in the organization.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this notion that all founders are the savants and the people who, to me, there's a combination, right? There's typically, to me, a good founding team is a person who understands, if it's a technology product, the person who understands a good overarching view of what it means to take that to fruition, right? You need that. You need that. Then that person knows who all to bring in to make it happen, right? But then you need a co-founder who understands all the other aspects of like go to market and how do I go get my first referenceable customer? How do I drive a pilot initiative? And things of that nature. Those are all important. And typically what happens is to get both those aspects in one person is not easy. It can be done.
It's unlikely. It's almost like
it's hard to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like you can be color white and black in the same time.
Right.
Those just are two different skill set.
If your startup is not too technocentric,
you probably can.
You probably can.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because like you could have an engineering background. You may be a lousy engineer, but you understand technology.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to me, so for example, when people ask me how do you define yourself, I say I'm a technologist and I like to apply technology to real world problems and find solutions. Right?
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great definition of you.
Yeah. So that's me, right? But if you ask me what's optimal code or how do you, take elk stack and do this, I'm like, go away. I mean, I don't have that aspect of, if somebody asks me, Java script, if you take JavaScript and, combine that with this, that, and the other, yeah, I'll get it conceptually, but that's not me. You don't need me for that. There are a lot of other brilliant people who can do that.
So let's back to you, Satish.
Okay.
Now you had this fantastic asset. It's finally a big validation since you stepped out from this fancy leadership role, right, in a big corporation. Now what? Why are you so crazy to start another startup?
See, like I said, you sort of have to be crazy, right? Yeah. But also, let's be honest, right? I mean, you really still want to be doing something and be productive, right? I mean, that's really more the motivation than anything else. I mean, you want to be productive in life, there's only so much you can go and play golf. and my son is still in college. Don't forget, Ben. I mean, colleges are not cheap. You still have to go do stuff, right? So yeah, so the current startup I'm in, right, which is optimizing cloud resources, eliminating cloud waste, things like that. That was that was a problem that was existing there, and it was fairly obvious. So it was not like it was something. It was not a eureka moment, if you
Yeah,
will, right?
yeah.
But yeah, it's fun.
I love that you just, always curious and stay humble and keep going. And I'm curious, Satish, it's so obvious that, you are this just smart guy and just want to do cool things. And I'm curious what drives you. You talk about you don't want to stay not productive, right? What drives you all along the way?
So, if there's one thing that, well, I mean, just so that it doesn't sound very idealistic or anything.
It is. It's okay.
No, no. What I mean by that is, I mean, there are many days uh, I'm not this, you know, full of joy and things like that. There are days I'm thinking, okay, what am I doing?
We
Because
all have
you
those days.
because you had asked me that question, remember?
Yes.
So we would meet often, and you would ask me, "See, you're always happy, right? You're always smiling or whatever." I try to, because what's the alternative, right? I mean, if you really think about it, we are all very blessed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take that in for a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all blessed. You know, we are not going hungry,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have a great life. We have a good family. And so there is something to be said about being grateful for what you already have, right?
Mm.
So that's kind of what brings me out of the funk, if you will, right?
I love
If
that.
I go into funks,
Mm-hmm.
which I do,
We all
so does
do.
every human being, right? What brings me out of those temporary funks is knowing how blessed most of us are, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about the next meal or this or that or the other. And we have a rich life in terms of experiences and people we meet and places we go and things like that. So once you sort of bring that gratitude element into your life,
Mm-hmm.
the rest works out easily by itself.
What do you want to leave this world behind with, Satish?
Oh, that's a very lofty
What do
question.
you imagine if we all pass, which we will, hundreds of years later? What do you want the world remember you by?
You know what? I've never been asked this question. So
If not now, when?
So, I, for me, it's the very basic things that I think, if there is a legacy that I leave, which is he was a good dad,
Mm.
good guy, and a good friend. To me, that is way more meaningful than anything else. It's not the assets or this, that, and the other. Because for me, when I get to just talk to my son, play around a golf with him, that brings more joy to me than anything else. So I guess to me, that's, if my family says, "Oh, yeah, he was a good guy," he was a good dad, and things like that, to me, that's a lot more meaningful than anything else.
I
And
love
a good
that.
friend, because to me, my friends are my assets.
Mm.
Really, I have a really good group of friends that are near and dear to me. And for me, if my friends said, "Oh my gosh, it was so fun to hang out with Satish," that's fantastic.
Well, take word from me. I always have a good time hanging out with you. And this is one thing that I think Satish make you so special is you are just so
Oh, thank you.
humble and so true to yourself.
You're
and
too kind.
that authenticity, that humbleness, that curiosity, and that fun energy you always bring, I truly think that that's truly made you special. So my last question for you, Satish,
All
is
right.
I know that people like you and me come a long way, and I'm curious to hear your perspective or your definition about what American dreams means for you, looking back the entire journey you have embarked.
That's a great question, right? To me, when I look at, and I say this a lot, and when I'm talking to my son or I'm talking to young people, uh, the journey of an immigrant coming to this country is probably the most amazing part of coming to the US, right? Because this, with all the noise we have today in the world, and there are political differences and this, that, and the other. But if you kind of cut through the whole clutter, the immigrant experience that one goes through coming to the US and the rich experience they garner along the way, and this uniquely, in my opinion, this America that we call a great experiment is probably the most unique experiment on planet Earth. There's nothing like it, right? And to me,
So beautiful.
if you're fortunate to go through this journey and just take in all the rich experiences,
Mhm.
the highs and the lows and everything that goes with it, it's just beautiful. So you just have to be grateful that one had that opportunity to go through that journey.
That is the best answer I ever got, Satish. Wow. So beautifully put. And you are so right. I think at the end of the day, people like you, people like me are so fortunate having that experience, having that journey, having that tenacity, having the courage to get on this journey to find not only what is on the other side of this wonder American land, but most importantly, what is within ourselves. And I think that is the biggest gift ever. So with that, Satish, thank you so much for
Oh,
being here
thank you.
today. What a lovely conversation. I am so inspired by you and your story, your journey each and every day. Truly, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do, and I cannot wait to see you all next week. Bye guys!